Amazing 7-minute encounter exposes. Surprising truth about brave black FBI agent, a touching trajectory of sacrifice and struggle. The chill of autumn hung in the air as Samuel maneuvered through the familiar streets of Brooksville, Ohio. His tall, imposing figure contrasted starkly with the crumbling facades surrounding him. Each turn reminded him of his grandmother's sacrifices, the nights she worked double shifts as a nurse, chased by exhaustion, yet determined to see her grandson succeed. Samuel clenched the steering wheel, recalling her whispered dreams for him to rise above the circumstances that threatened to drown them. Tonight was no ordinary night. Tonight he was on the verge of dismantling a crime syndicate that had festered amidst the town's decline, reinforced by powerful allies who echo whispers of corruption. He parked outside an aging diner, the flickering neon sign casting a ghostly glow on his resolute expression. Inside, the air was thick with secrecy. Agents gathered, their eyes surprisingly narrowed at him, a man of color often yet unjustly perceived through the lens of stereotype. He breathed in the stale coffee, reminding himself that being underestimated would only fuel his determination. As he scribbled notes about the syndicate's connection to respected town officials, a thread in his mind tugged at something deeper. The images came flooding back, tattered photographs from family albums revealing his own grandmother's struggle when her life savings were stolen by one of those very officials. Anger ignited in him, a consuming rage that pushed his heart into a chaotic rhythm. He is driven to seek justice, but this realization brought forth another layer of conflict. Could he uphold his duty without succumbing to the very corruption he sought to eradicate? Samuel felt the weight of responsibility crash upon him. How can he become the beacon of change when shadows from his past loom so close? Doubts circled his mind as he prepared for the encounter. He understood the risks, and yet here he was, wrestling with the monstrous conflict between his family's legacy and his sworn oath to justice. Somewhere a bell rang, the kind that reminded him of childhood, yet here it mirrored a haunting uncertainty. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Suddenly his phone buzzed violently, breaking his focus. It was an anonymous tip concerning innocent lives at stake, people drawn into the syndicate's web, families caught unawares. Samuel felt his resolve waver. Could he sacrifice his principles for the greater good? The internal pull between the commitment to his career and an urgent need to protect the vulnerable spiraled into paralysis. Moments later, a shadow passed by, an intruder at the door. Samuel's pulse quickened as he considered his next steps. This unexpected visitor might hold crucial insights into the syndicate, but at what cost? Would collaboration mean he sacrifices his journey, entangling his fate in a web of mistrust? With everything stretched thin, uncertainty brewed as he faced this pivotal moment between light and shadow, transformation and stagnation. Would this ultimately lead him to deeper revelations, or risk everything he'd built? Samuel's heart raced as the door swung open, revealing a figure cloaked in shadows. The flickering diner lights played tricks, casting a flicker of menace across the stranger's face. He had a scar running along his cheek, a reminder that every action in this perilous game bore the marks of consequence. The man stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a deliberate slowness that heightened the tension coiling within the small diner. "Agent Parker," the new arrival grunted, his voice low and gravelly. "I'm here to help." Help was a word Samuel had learned to scrutinize. He observed the man's posture, the way he leaned slightly backward, a defensive stance suggesting a life lived in constant vigilance. Samuel's gut twisted. Help often came at a price he wasn't sure he wanted to pay. As he gestured for the man to sit, Samuel's mind raced. This could be a lifeline, or another snare in the web he was trying to navigate. "What do you know about the syndicate?" he asked, controlling the tremor in his voice. He needed information, yet a deeper part of him buzzed with mistrust. The man leaned in, lowering his voice. "I've seen the way you're being watched. They know who you are, what you're doing. I'm not the enemy, but I can show you the enemy's hand." Samuel felt a surge of adrenaline at the thought. He was acutely aware that every choice he made could very well reshape his destiny. This man, this stranger, wielded an opportunity, yet suspicion tugged at his resolve. "What's your connection?" Samuel pressed, conscious of how easily he could become ensnared by deceit. The man hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty brushing across his hardened features before he smirked ruefully. "Let's just say I've lost as much to them as you have," he replied, nodding toward the distant memories of his grandmother. In that moment, Samuel recognized pain in the man's eyes, a familiar echo from his past. "This town needs someone like you, someone not afraid to challenge the status quo." Samuel's internal compass spun wildly. He had battled the notion of being a community leader, but was he ready to step into that role? Guided by the memories of his grandmother's struggles, he finally asked, "Why me? I'm just one man against a powerful syndicate." "Because one man can light a fire," the stranger replied, determination spilling from his words, "and fires spread." Samuel held the gaze of this enigmatic figure, an unexpected ally with scars that whispered of shared struggles. The warmth of purpose began to ignite in his chest, slowly overpowering his prevailing doubts. Suddenly, the weight of responsibility pressed down with renewed intensity. If he chose to accept the man's offer, Samuel was certain it would alter his identity both personally and professionally. This step could push him beyond the shadows of his history. Yet what lurked behind the curtain of this potential alliance? Could he trust the fire that promised to change everything? Before he could fully commit, the diner door burst open with a crash, and a burst of cold air cut through the warmth of the moment. He turned sharply, dread pooling in his stomach as the heavy footsteps of approaching trouble echoed ominously. The choice of trust or treachery now rattled at the edge of clarity. "Looks like we've got company," Samuel said, adrenaline surging anew. "What will we do?" The man flashed a grin filled with fierce resolve. "Time to decide if you're ready to burn brighter." In that moment, Samuel realized the flame for justice was not just a personal journey. It was an impending confrontation with the very essence of his character. Would he rise to meet this challenge, or would he be consumed by the very fire he sought to wield? The path ahead was convoluted, and he stood at a crossroads. What lay ahead was uncertain, yet it promised to test the limits of his principles in unexpected ways. The time had come to face the flames of change. Samuel's instincts kicked in, and his body tensed like a coiled spring. The diner's ambiance, once a reassuring constant, now felt like a stage for impending chaos. The figure behind him remained stoic, a watchful guardian ready to navigate the turbulence about to unfold. Samuel's mind spun with the pressure of urgency. Each moment felt fragile, fraught with the weight of choices he had yet to make. "Stay close," the man advised, his voice barely above a whisper yet charged with authority. The warning resonated within Samuel as he turned to face the door, where silhouettes loomed ominously. Shadows danced as the figures entered, each step echoing like the ticking of a time bomb. Samuel was acutely aware that this moment could fracture his resolve, or ignite it. A sense of clarity crystallized in Samuel's thoughts. If he was to confront the syndicate, he couldn't linger in the confines of fear. It was less about surviving this immediate threat and more about forging a path toward a larger battle. He had a decision to make. Would he become a pawn in someone else's game, or would he seize the power within himself to rewrite the rules? The door swung wider, revealing two men with hardened expressions, their eyes scanning the diner as if searching for a ghost. Samuel braced himself, pulling from the depths of his experience. He had watched his grandmother face down adversities with fierce resilience, a legacy that bubbled within him now. "Are you sure about this?" he murmured, more to himself than to the stranger beside him. "Courage isn't a choice when you're pushed to the edge," the man replied, fully aware of the stakes at hand. "It's a response." Samuel nodded, the gravity of his choices settling heavily upon him as the two figures approached with intent. Their very presence clawed at his nerves. Yet amid that tension, he felt emboldened. The choices he had been mulling over came crashing down into a single potent realization. He could no longer afford to be merely reactive. He needed to channel his fears into a strategy, to formulate a plan that would not just safeguard him, but potentially dismantle the hold the syndicate had over his life. "What's the play here?" he asked, voice trembling only slightly. "Observe, listen, and when I give the signal, follow my lead," the man responded, prepped as if orchestrating a delicate operation. Samuel's pulse quickened. The prospect of taking proactive action thrilled him. They huddled together slightly as the newcomers exchanged hushed, threatening words, a dangerous vernacular that hinted at the syndicate's interests. Fear twisted in the pit of Samuel's stomach, yet it was invigorated by anticipation. Every fiber of his being wanted to recoil from confrontation, yet the echoes of his past filled him with purpose. This was no longer just about surviving, it was about claiming his narrative. He focused on the conversation unfolding before him, gathering details, patterns, anything that could give him leverage against them. Suddenly, a loud thud broke the tension. A chair toppled, followed by harsh laughter. The mood shifted. They were onto something. Potential information. An opening. Samuel's heart raced. Here lay the seeds of his ascent, but also of peril. He could wrestle authority from the jaws of intimidation. "That's our cue," the man said, a determined glint in his eyes. Samuel swallowed hard, understanding the implication. This was where the value of trust crystallized. He would either rise with this stranger as an ally, or sink into defeat. "Are you with me?" the man asked, his tone laced with urgency. "Always," Samuel affirmed, steeling himself for the leap into the unknown. His mind whirled with a kaleidoscope of emotions, fear, determination, and a fervent need to reclaim power over his life. As they prepared for action, Samuel felt a spark ignite within, a resolute commitment to unravel the layers of deception that had long shackled his sense of agency. The battle that loomed promised change, challenging him to transcend mere survival and embrace his evolution as a leader, enlightened by conviction. In that intense moment, his decision took shape. Whether it meant confronting the syndicate or dismantling the tightly knit web of loyalty and fear that bound them, he resolved to emerge from these trials a different man, forged in the flames of struggle. But as the door slammed shut behind one of the men, Samuel's heart sank. A new adversary was on the horizon, one whose identity was cloaked in deeper shadows. Did he truly possess the courage to confront this next challenge, and what collateral damage could it bring to both his mission and himself? The diner's atmosphere turned electric as the moment of confrontation drew near. Samuel's pulse raced, a tempo that matched the brewing storm within him. He could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing against his chest, yet amid that pressure, a flicker of determination sparked. He clenched his fists, channeling his anxiety into focus. This was his chance to confront not just the syndicate, but himself, the man he was becoming, forged in the fire of adversity. As the man beside him shifted slightly, Samuel took a deep breath. The low voices of the newcomers coalesced into a chorus of intimidation, each syllable dripping with contempt. Familiar emotions surged, a potent mix of fear and resolve. Thoughts flashed through his mind. Every setback, every moment of self-doubt had led to this point. This confrontation was not just about them, it was about him reclaiming agency from a life once dictated by others. He derived strength from the knowledge that fear could either paralyze or propel. "Stay sharp," the man whispered, his eyes narrowed, analyzing each nuance of the scene before them. Samuel followed his gaze and noted details. The tattoos on the men's necks, the way they subtly shifted weapons on their belts, the almost imperceptible signs of aggression in their postures. Intelligence, not brute force, was going to win this battle. Meanwhile, Samuel's mind shifted gears. He began picturing strategies, the tactics he had studied during his numerous days spent in training, how to assert control over a narrative, to steer a fragile situation toward his advantage. The diner was no longer a setting of panic, it was a chessboard of opportunity. "Nervous?" the man asked, a hint of concern flickering across his features. "No," he replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "I'm ready." He could see the cautious respect in the man's eyes. In that moment, Samuel felt the mantle of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He was no longer a passive observer, but an active participant in his fate. The thoughts of inaction and fear fell away like leaves in autumn. Here, he was not just a victim, he was a challenger, hungry for change. As the stranger's conversation grew louder, an unexpected thought struck Samuel. These men were living embodiments of his worst fears. Each word they uttered could either solidify his vanquishment or provide the fuel for his resurgence. It was a pivotal realization that highlighted a cruel irony. His adversaries were also his greatest teachers. "Listen closely," the man urged softly, bringing Samuel back to the moment at hand. He leaned further in, anchoring their shared focus. Samuel nodded, steeling himself to absorb every detail, every flicker of emotion that might provide insight into their weaknesses. Just as Samuel began to detect a faint crack in their facade, the door swung open again. Who entered was unexpected, a woman sharp-featured with an air of confidence that seemed to challenge the darkness filling the diner. She scanned the room, settling her gaze on Samuel. The corners of her lips curved into a knowing smile that danced with mischief. In an instant, tension crackled between them. Was she ally or foe? Perhaps an opportunity, some hidden connection he had long forgotten. The questions piled up in his mind, an urgent mantra that pressed against the confines of his sanity. This wasn't just another player, this was a potential game-changer, yet the uncertainty was a reminder of the stakes he faced. "Who is she?" Samuel whispered, uncertainty creeping back in, twisting his gut. "An old acquaintance," the man replied, unease lining his voice, "but her intentions remain cautious." Samuel's heart thudded again, tugging at the threads of trust he had just begun to weave with his companion. This was a test, a pivotal moment that could redefine their precarious partnership. He felt energy coiling within him, and as the woman approached, he instantly recognized that echo of necessity rising again. What truths would she unveil? Could her arrival turn the tide, or would it bring forth complications he wasn't ready to face? In the thickness of expectancy, Samuel stood, grounded yet vulnerable, aware that the answers awaited him just beyond the edge of discovery. The game had changed, and now so had the rules. He was never just an observer anymore. The hourglass had been flipped. The sands of his fate were shifting rapidly, and it was time for him to engage fully. But as he considered what lay ahead, doubts flickered on the periphery of his mind. Did he truly comprehend the risks involved, or was he stepping into a deeper labyrinth of danger? The answers were inevitably closer than he anticipated, but at what cost? The woman's approach transformed the room's atmosphere. Samuel felt a visceral pull as she came closer, an odd blend of recognition and apprehension igniting within him. Her confidence mixed seamlessly with a hint of mischief. He studied her, sharp features, piercing eyes that seemed to dissect him with an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable. "What do you want?" he blurted out, his voice more curt than intended. He barely recognized his own tone, but the urgency of the moment demanded clarity. He had no time for veiled intentions or playful exchanges. "I've come to see how you've evolved," she replied, the hint of a smile playing on her lips. There was a chill in her voice that sent a shiver down his spine, each word laced with unspoken memories. This was someone who held access to chapters of his life he had tried to close. "I didn't ask for a reunion," he shot back, driven by both irritation and curiosity. Confronting the woman felt like confronting an echo of his past, a past he had fought so hard to distance himself from. "Reunions aren't always initiated by choice, are they?" she said, leaning casually against a nearby booth, her posture both relaxed and predatory. Samuel's eyes narrowed. The tension from the syndicate men lingered, but his focus had shifted. The battle here was as personal as it was external. He could sense the stakes rising as if the very air encased them in an invisible web of conflict. He needed to wrest back control. "What do you know about me now?" he asked, aware that this confrontation could reveal truths he hadn't fully accepted. "More than you might think," she replied, the challenge in her tone inviting him into a mental sparring match. "You've traded fear for determination. You stand on the precipice of something significant." Her words stirred an acknowledgement deep within Samuel. Fear had indeed forged a clearer version of himself. Each confrontation thus far had chipped away at the remnants of the man who once hesitated. Yet her insinuation hinted at deeper insights he couldn't afford to overlook. "Then tell me how I can ensure my next step doesn't fall into the same traps I've faced before," he replied, shifting from defensiveness to a challenge of his own. He was here, standing against everything that had once ruled him, and perhaps in this moment he could glean advice from anyone, even from someone who reminded him of all he'd left behind. A flicker of respect crossed her face, subtle yet potent. "Your most crucial lesson lies in understanding that every player at this table has their own agenda. Yours needs to be defined. You have the opportunity to take the lead, but only if you recognize the power in your story." He recalled that agitated tension he had felt earlier, the moment of clarity that had sparked a transformation inside. She was right. He had chosen to step into the arena rather than fade away. This was a powerful realization, but it also carried an overwhelming weight. As she spoke, Samuel could sense the quiet intensity building around him. The syndicate men had begun to notice the shift in energy, their casual conversation laced with nervous glances toward the growing confrontation. Could she be an ally? How would her presence affect them? "Why help me now?" he fired back, still unsure if she posed a threat or a lifeline. "You could have simply walked away." "Walking away isn't in my nature," she responded, her expression shifting from playful to deadly serious. "And I can see the potential in you. Our paths have crossed for a reason. Embrace it or deny it, but understand this. You have the capacity to redefine this moment. Trust in that." The gravity of her statement weighed on him, and he felt the unmistakable echoes of doubt creep back in. His reflection shimmered in her steely eyes. Was he truly capable of grasping the narrative to control it? Before he could voice another question, the syndicate men shifted their attention fully towards them, their demeanor contingent on the unexpected confrontation at the diner's edge. "Who's the girl?" one sneered, breaking the fragile bubble of dialogue that had formed. Samuel's heart raced as the tension thickened, and he realized that the next course of action depended entirely on his choices. Decisions are breeding grounds for consequences, Samuel thought, weighing the risks. In that moment, potential paths unfurled before him. Would he embrace the challenge of this interaction, relying on newfound confidence to navigate both past and present threats? Or was he dangerously stepping into an entangled web, one where this confrontation could spiral out of control? The choice loomed like a dark shadow, and he had only seconds to act. The air crackled with imminent danger, and as he prepared himself to speak, he felt the formidable shift within him, a dawning recognition of not only what he stood against, but also what he could become. Don't back down now. The true test was only beginning. Would he embrace the power of his own story and the unexpected allies that came with it? Or would fear dictate the remainder of this night? Sam's instincts screamed at him for a decision. The syndicate men were closing in, their eyes gleaming with curiosity and suspicion, eager to pounce on any sign of weakness. If he faltered now, the consequences could spiral badly, not just for him, but possibly for that woman whose unexpected return had turned this mundane diner into a battleground of souls. "Why don't you ask her yourself?" he challenged the sneering man, his voice steady despite the trepidation coiling within him. The shift felt cathartic. The act of defiance surged through him like a drug, awakening a sense of control he had believed lost. The consortium member's expression shifted from amusement to annoyance, a clear warning that his patience was wearing thin. Simultaneously, the woman remained impassive, leaning slightly closer, her unflinching gaze a candle in the tempest of uncertainty. "You don't want to speak to her, believe me," Samuel continued, feeling a newfound determination welling up inside him. "What you should be worried about is who you're dealing with right now." Her lips curved into a smile that winked at mischief, but her eyes were calculating, weighing each word he issued. This was more than a verbal tussle. It was an exploration of self-worth, and Samuel knew his answer depended on the stakes involved. The room fell silent, the air taut with expectation. Samuel could hear the faint murmurs of other diners, their casual conversations now overturned by the palpable confrontation sprawled before them. His thoughts raced as he processed the intricate web surrounding him. "Who's trying to play the hero?" the leader of the syndicate called out, voice dripping with contempt, taking a step forward. "You think you can just waltz in here and dictate terms?" As Sam met the leader's gaze, a flicker of realization struck him. His journey had not been solitary, it had forged him, but it was the culmination of every crush beneath the weight of his past that had sculpted this moment. He straightened, adopting a grounding posture that offered no hint of vulnerability. "What I think is immaterial compared to what needs to happen next," he replied, keenly aware of the stakes. "I'm done being a pawn, and I refuse to be part of your game any longer. You might not care about how this ends, but make no mistake, I'm in control of my next move." The tension crackled around them, palpable like an approaching storm. The syndicate man's smile turned into a snarl, and for a second Sam feared he'd pushed too far, but he held his ground, feet firmly rooted. Then she stepped forward, her presence commanding his attention, an unexpected ally whose motivations remained obscured. "This isn't just about bravado. Look at him," she said, chopping through the thick tension like a knife. "He has the cunning to emerge not just unscathed, but empowered from this. Each word he speaks has weight, and you'd be foolish to underestimate him." The leader hesitated, brow furrowing as he absorbed her statement. This was a pivotal moment. Within it lay the power to deflate the authority they brandished. Sam's heart raced as he pressed forward, sensing momentum shift in his favor. Could he wield their surprise? "Let's cut the theatrics and get to the heart of the matter," Sam added, voice low, deliberate. The sudden steel in his tone made the room feel smaller. "What's your plan? You think issuing threats makes you powerful?" He felt boldness swell within him, igniting a fire that he wasn't sure he could contain. This was no longer a mere confrontation. It had transformed into a reckoning where he could define the narrative. As the syndicate men eyed one another, calculating the ramifications of their next move, Samuel sensed a strange liberation. He was no longer shackled by fear. If the moment was to embrace a new reality, it meant risking everything for a chance at control. It was time to shape his destiny. But as they continued to size each other up, a new voice cut through the tension, remarkably calm yet commanding. "Sam, we're running out of time," she interjected. Her expression conveyed an urgency that shifted his focus. Panic surged. What spoke within her gaze? Did she hold answers that could alter this precarious balance? The dance between them felt inextricable, a web of past and present, potential and peril. "Wait, what do you mean?" Samuel posed, heart hammering now in confusion. "What could be out there that we haven't confronted yet?" Her reply hung in the air. The answer awaited with trepidation, one that could redefine not only this confrontation, but the entirety of his journey. The stars had aligned, yet within that conjunction lay the promise of chaos or clarity. What twists awaited around the corner? The night's intricacies were far from over, and he felt the shadows begin to dance with possibilities. Samuel's mind raced, grappling with the gravity of her words. "We're running out of time." The statement lingered like a smoky shadow across his thoughts, imploring him to dig deeper, to unravel the urgency coiled beneath the surface. With every second that slipped away, the syndicate's grip tightened around them, and he could feel the oppressive weight of uncertainty creeping back. "Out there," he echoed, his voice quieter, more wary, as he scanned the diner, half expecting enemies to spring from the corners where shadows met glass. "What are you talking about? What should we be worried about now?" The woman met his gaze, her confidence unwavering. "There's a lot more at play here than you realize, Sam. They don't just want to intimidate you, they're after something much bigger. And if we don't act now, we might not have a chance to uncover it." In that moment, the layers of the conflict unfurled in Samuel's mind. Facing the syndicate men was only a prelude to a greater threat haunting the periphery. He could feel the cold dread of just how naive he had been, crafting a facade of control while the real game was beyond his immediate vision. His heartbeat thrummed louder against his ribs, making him hyper-aware of the palpable tension around them. The stakes had escalated. "What can we possibly do? I barely have a hold on this situation as it is," he admitted, feeling vulnerable with every passing second. How had his bravado turned into an admission of panic? "Stop thinking about just surviving and start thinking about winning." Her words cut through his self-doubt like a beacon. Samuel searched her face, determined to extract any piece of insight she might offer. What did she see in him that he couldn't even recognize himself? It frustrated and intrigued him simultaneously. "My past? My failures? I used to run with the wrong crowd. It ended poorly." The admission hung in the air, a confession both liberating and shackling. The woman raised an eyebrow, as if to say her perception of him exceeded the limits of his self-judgment. "That's exactly it, Sam," she replied earnestly. "You're standing on the cusp of your own redemption, something they've underestimated. Embrace what you've learned. You're no pawn, you're a player." As her words began to ignite a spark of clarity within him, he instinctively drew from the crucible of his experiences. All the moments of vulnerability, the grit it took to forge ahead through adversity, now amalgamated into something powerful. Resilience wasn't built from unyielding strength alone. It sprouted from acknowledging past failures. The syndicate leader shifted, sensing the tide's change, and Samuel felt the pressure coiling around him tighten. He had a choice to make. He could continue letting fear dictate his actions or lean into the newfound conviction bubbling up inside him. "All right," he said, leaning into his determination, steadying his hands against the table. "What's the play? If they're after something larger, we need to plan our next move carefully. You need to create a distraction. Let them chase after phantoms while we find the truth." Her confidence was contagious, lighting his resolve. "This isn't just your fight. It's a chance to reclaim what they've taken, both for yourself and for others caught in their web." In that moment, Samuel understood his own power, the deeper truth of what drove him. It wasn't just about the confrontation anymore. It was about redefining his life. Together, they exchanged strategies, piecing together contingency upon contingency, enveloped in the urgency of the moment. The connection between them, the unspoken bond of shared understanding, felt electric. Who would have thought that within the walls of a seemingly inconsequential diner, their fates would intertwine so dramatically? Just as they reached the pivotal moment of their plan, a loud crash reverberated through the diner, and every head turned to see chaos erupting around them. "Look out!" Samuel's instincts kicked in, adrenaline flooding his system, forcing him into motion. What had they just stepped into? The stakes had officially risen, and the moment demanded clarity in the chaos. Could he stay in control when everything threatened to spiral? Time seemed suspended again, waiting to see if he would embrace the fear or harness it. The future hung in the balance, pregnant with possibilities, waiting for the next move. The cacophony pierced through Samuel's thoughts, a jarring reminder of the stakes at hand. He instinctively dropped into a defensive stance, scanning the diner for threats. The chaos unfurling around him mirrored his internal tumult. What had felt like a moment of clarity now threatened to explode into a maelstrom of confusion. "Stay close," the woman snapped, her brow furrowed, command in her voice cutting through the rising panic. They pressed towards the back exit, hearts thundering in sync with the escalating turmoil. Samuel's mind was a battlefield, strategies flickering and fading like shadows. He was no longer overwhelmed by fear. Instead, he felt a burgeoning determination solidifying within him, as if each heartbeat fired a fresh bolt of resolve. With every step, he mentally catalogued the chaotic tableau, overturned tables, frightened patrons trying to escape, and silhouetted figures scrambling through the door. There was danger, yes, but also opportunity. The syndicate aimed to sow discord, a classic tactic Samuel was painfully familiar with. He recalled his previous life, a time when chaos had often paralyzed him. But not this time. He was no longer that person. "Now or never, Sam," he thought, reflecting on her words, illuminating a path through uncertainty. They plunged through the exit, reaching the parking lot just as the shocked diners began to spill outside. Samuel could see the emblem of the syndicate's insignia embroidered on the jackets of the figures approaching. This was more than just survival. This was confronting the beast head-on. "Where to?" he asked, breathing heavily, glancing over his shoulder. "Into the alley." She pointed down a narrow passageway separating two buildings. The decision rested on him. He could lead them into an unknown danger or follow instincts honed through desperation. The alley was dark, a tight space suggesting both concealment and vulnerability. "Let's go," he said, forcing himself to step into the shadows, quelling the dread simmering in the pit of his stomach. As they crept forward, he replayed their earlier conversation, winning over survival, redefining his narrative. The temptation to retreat flickered, but he clung to the knowledge of the power behind his choices. This was his moment of transformation, a chance to rise beyond the ghosts of his past. Adrenaline coursed through him as he and the woman ducked behind a dumpster, breaths mingling with the stench of refuse. Samuel felt the solidity of concrete beneath him, grounding him in purpose. He had a plan now, a series of calculated moves that could turn the tides against them. "They have our scent," she whispered, eyes darting towards the mouth of the alley. "We'll need a distraction, and fast. That's your specialty, right?" "Yeah," Samuel replied, his mind rapidly firing with possibilities. He wasn't merely reacting, he was opting to take control. "I'll create a diversion. You find a way to get back to the cafe. Gather any intel you can." "Samuel, you can't. No time for debate." The words tumbled out with surprising conviction. He'd learned hard lessons in life. It was time to embody the resilience he had unearthed. As he moved to execute the plan, every nerve screamed at him to consider the consequences. What lay ahead was unknown, but tethered to the urgency of every moment. He knew that confronting not just the syndicate, but also his past failures as a man, friend, and former shadow of himself, sat on the precipice of this chaotic evening. As he launched himself into the fray, a calculated risk, one question surged to the forefront. Would he finally emerge not just as a survivor, but as the architect of his own fate? Those seconds felt like hours as he drew nearer to their adversaries, and the moment of truth loomed. A confrontation, a revelation awaited just beyond the frenzied air. What would it take to step out from the depths of uncertainty into the light of his own potential? The alley held a suffocating stillness, and Samuel could feel the weight of his own choice pressing down on him. The figures he had seen were now engaged in a frantic search, their shouts merging into an unintelligible roar of authority and desperation. He was acutely aware that he was stepping into the role of not just a pawn, but a player willing to challenge the game. Samuel's heart raced as he glanced back at his companion. Her expression was taut with concern, a mixture of determination and fear that mirrored his own. He nodded, acknowledging their unspoken trust. It was a moment of clarity in the chaos. Each silent affirmation bound him ever tighter to his resolve. He moved silently along the alley's perimeter, keeping low and hidden. The flashing lights from police vehicles outside sporadically illuminated the dark corners, casting long shadows that swirled like specters at his feet. Desperation clawed at him. The instinct to flee bubbled just beneath the surface, but a voice, convinced and orchestrated from a place of newfound strength, chided him each time he hesitated. This was a test, a trial that would determine who he truly was. The narratives he had built around himself were fragile and malleable, threads woven by fear and loss. But here, among the refuse and uncertainty, he felt something shift. Confidence. He could exploit their ignorance. The syndicate members were disoriented, frantically questioning fleeing patrons and scaring those trapped in their vehicles. He had to become their focus, a decoy strong enough to divert attention away from his companion and towards himself. With a deep breath, Samuel planted his feet, summoning the courage that had been dormant for too long. Adrenaline lit him up as he positioned himself at a safe distance behind a dumpster and prepared to unleash his plan. He picked up a discarded can, the dull metal resting cool against his palm, and with a grunt of effort he hurled it against the wall at the end of the alley. The clatter erupted thunderously, drawing every set of eyes towards it. For a moment the world became still, breaths suspended in anticipation. As he had hoped, the syndicate's attention swung in his direction, eager to chase down the noise, an instinctive response to chaos. "Now!" he grunted, surging with urgency. The moment he executed the diversion, a sense of liberation washed over him. He was no longer just a passive observer of his life. He was an active participant, shaping his own destiny. Yet the sudden rush from behind caught him off guard, a figure barreling down the alley towards him, knife glinting in the dim light. Fear laced through him, but instead of freezing, he pivoted instinctively, leveraging his peripheral awareness. The moves came instinctively, the muscle memory of his past provoking a calculated counter. He ducked and sidestepped, taking advantage of the alley's confines and using agility over brute strength. The knife sliced through air where he had been a heartbeat ago, a reminder of the razor's edge between life and death. In that fleeting moment, exhilaration sparked within him, a realization that he had become more than just a survivor. He was adapting, evolving right before his own eyes. With a deft pivot, he came around to face the assailant again, focusing not on the blade, but on the intent behind the eyes. They were not so different, both seeking power, but Samuel had found purpose. In that instant, he decided to confront his adversary with a strength honed from vulnerability. Caught off guard by his sudden shift in demeanor, the assailant hesitated, uncertainty flickering across his face. Samuel seized the moment, feeling the intoxicating pull of the fight, not as a victim, but as a warrior. With one decisive movement, he charged forward, grappling with the man for control of the knife. The struggle illuminated a truth buried deep within him. He was ready to reclaim not just this moment, but every piece of himself he had lost. As he wrestled for control, the question loomed yet again. What did he ultimately stand to gain or lose? The stakes were higher than survival. They were about redefining who he was meant to be. Just then, a voice pierced the chaos. His ally, rushing back to join him, armed with vital information, but drawing dangerous attention. Would he allow the past to dictate the outcome, or would he finally stand proud against his own demons? The decision hung in the air like the blade, shimmering with promise or peril. In the depths of the alley, the struggle took on an electric tension, fueling Samuel's will to overcome. The knife glinted as it danced perilously close, yet in that moment he felt a profound shift within himself, a visceral understanding that not just his life, but his mission hung in the balance. With one final surge of grit, Samuel pivoted, disarmed the man with a twist of power, and sent the knife skittering across pavement. The thug stumbled backward, astonishment flickering across his face. "What the hell?" he spat. But the question was irrelevant now. Samuel was no longer simply reacting, he was defining the narrative. He stood fully upright, chest rising with determination. "You don't get to intimidate me anymore," he declared, his voice steady and strong. The alley echoed back his newfound resolve, reinforcing an identity he had only begun to embrace. Behind him, he caught a glimpse of his ally rushing back into the fray. Her decision to return could have been sheer folly, but there was something in her eyes, perhaps respect or acknowledgement, that signified belief in him. She arrived just in time, cutting through the remnants of his exhaustion with clarity. "Get ready, Sam!" she yelled, knowing the tide was turning. "They're not finished yet!" Momentum surged through Samuel as he became acutely aware of the subtle shift in the air. What had once been uncertainty now transformed into a surge of adrenaline. He was confronted not just by the danger, but by the knowledge that this was his defining moment. Every choice, every hardship led to this, the reclaiming of his narrative. As the syndicate men regrouped, Samuel found solace in the realization of his purpose. He wasn't merely fighting for survival, he was taking a stand for justice, not just for himself, but for the countless people touched by the syndicate's parasitic hold. With renewed vigor, he turned to his ally. "Let's end this," he said resolutely. Together, they strategized swiftly, responding to the shouts echoing from the alley's mouth as the remaining syndicate members approached, their motives coiled and ready to strike. But Samuel held firm, a grounded flame of purpose ignited within him. "Listen up," he bellowed, projecting leadership, not fear. "You can choose to walk away or face the consequences of your actions. This town deserves better." At that moment he recognized his own power, the influence of his voice amidst the chaos that had consumed Brooksville for too long. He was not alone. The community that he felt called to protect was spilling forward through him. The thugs hesitated, sensing the shift in the tide. They were thieves of hope, masquerading as authority figures, but Samuel's commitment to justice had crystallized. No longer shackled by the shadows of his past, he understood that their power relied on fear, and fear was losing its grip over him. In a flash of strategy, Samuel directed his ally to flank the group while he created diversions, using chaos against them. A throw here, a shout there. It wasn't just about brute strength, but about channeling the spontaneity his life had taught him. The men fell into disarray, caught off guard by Samuel's resolve and unyielding confidence. In the flurry of punches and counterattacks, Samuel felt not just his muscles strain, they felt liberated, as if every blow landed pushed him further into his own courage. Triumph surged as they took down another adversary, the sense of purpose overwhelming. The last of the syndicate men, now desperate, stood with his back against the wall. They had turned the tide, and within Samuel surged a relentless fire, a culmination of years of struggle, all boiling down to this pivotal confrontation. "Why don't you tell us who else is involved?" Samuel demanded, steadied by his newfound position of strength. The man glared with defiance, but Samuel recognized that defiance flickered beneath the surface. He understood now, in this moment, that true strength came from a willingness to confront not just others, but himself and what he had endured. The man took a breath, and in that silence, something in his resolve cracked. "Fine, they're everywhere. Friendly faces hiding behind closed doors," he blurted, spilling secrets that would ripple throughout Brooksville. Each revelation felt like an anchor, tying Samuel firmly to his purpose. With the police sirens now only a heartbeat away, Samuel felt the tension easing. But this wasn't just a physical conquest. It was a psychological resurrection. The man before him wasn't just a foe. He symbolized every chain Samuel had fought against, and he was ready to undo them. With the police arriving and the remaining syndicate members yielding, Samuel felt the connections he built with others throughout the night. The people his grandmother had sacrificed for, the lives entwined with this town's fate. Those relationships had widened his understanding of strength, resilience, and purpose. As dawn broke, casting warm hues through the alley, the chaos subsided into resolve. Samuel stood tall, transformations evident in his stance. The echoes of fear that once shadowed him faded into whispers. He had achieved not just a victory over the syndicate, but a victory over his own past. He turned to his ally, pride unfurling within him. "We did it," he said, connections shimmering between them. This journey wasn't blind luck. It was a testament to growth. Each struggle, each challenge shaped by his grandmother's legacy, now celebrated. Brooksville was still there, waiting for renewal. A chance for justice, a chance for him to step more boldly into leadership. As they began to move forward to embrace the nascent day, Samuel realized he had conquered not merely a battle, but a pivotal waypoint in his journey toward becoming a beacon for change. This singular encounter had solidified his growth. He was no longer at the mercy of circumstance, but an architect of purpose. Now, as he looked out at the dawn, he felt a powerful urge stir within him, a responsibility to continue transforming not just himself, but everything he had once taken for granted. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.